Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to the Lifeonaire Show, where we help people build better lives, better businesses, better relationships, better health, better all across the board. I am Jason Wojo, your host. I am joined by my co-host and partner in crime, Polish Peter. Welcome, Peter.
Hey man, and that is the much better looking host over here than the other one. But yeah, let's bring it on, man.
Except you look like you're in a white room somewhere locked up in padded walls, and I'm like,
well, you look like you're in prison. So
okay, all right. So broadcasting to you directly from the state penitentiary. All right, so here we are. Listen, super excited about today's episode. So Steve Cook, my mentor, he's your coach as well, Peter, has developed these things called the 4 stages to financial prosperity. And now in this episode, we're going to dive into the first of the stages, and there's a reason why we're breaking these up, by the way. The first stage is the most important. And Steve talks about what happens when you don't have that first stage, when you don't have that foundation, when you don't set up and take the time to make a blueprint in your roadmap for what you want your life to look like in every area, right? And so there's a tremendous amount of detail and complexity in some regard. In some regards, it's complex because it covers many different areas of your life, but ultimately this is supposed to be something simple and that is actually useful and implementable. It's not something that you do. It's not an exercise where you do it once and you put it away in a folder somewhere, right? You're reflecting on this a lot, and it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, man. And here's the thing, guys. If you are listening to this episode, listen to this episode, because here's the thing. At the events, when we do the 3-day events, stage 1, the vision, is the stuff that people skip the most. And so don't skip this episode. Listen to it. Vision is the most important thing to this whole entire process. And I want to encourage you guys, pay attention very closely to what he says to say.
And what Peter's talking about here, when he mentioned the 3 days, he's talking about the Lifeonaire Get a Life Getaway. It just happens to be 3 days long. And we literally spend a full 3 days going through this. And that's how powerful it is. You are going to get the fire stream, the fire hose approach to this right now, where you're getting this dumped on you. So I would encourage you to take a lot of notes, like listen carefully, listen to it several times, in fact, because there's gold in here. There's an incredible amount of gold nuggets in here. And like Peter said, and Steve echoes in the training, like how many of us spend more time planning a vacation or a party more than we do our lives, right? Yeah, our wedding, right? Side note, Peter, like how about, you and I are both divorced. Like if I know for myself, if I would have spent more time creating a vision, setting up that foundation for my marriage, there's a good chance that things would have turned out differently for me, right? And so that's why this vision applies to every different part of your life. I'm super excited for you to get to hear this. So let's jump right into it now. Here's my interview with Steve Cook talking about the first stage of the 4 stages of financial prosperity. Hey everyone, welcome. I am with Steve Cook, the founder of Lifeonaire, my personal mentor for over 10 years now. And Steve has developed something that's been pretty incredible in my own life. And I've seen this have a tremendous impact on many, many, many other people as well. And what I'm referring to is something that Steve originated himself. He came up with this incredibly simple yet profound series of steps, a recipe, even a formula for achieving financial prosperity and a freedom that goes along with that. And accordingly, he's called these the 4 stages to financial prosperity. And so, Steve, with that, first of all, I want to ask you, before we even get into the 4 stages, where did this come from?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is this: just like most other people who are willing to go out there and lay everything on the line and to take risks in order to have a quote unquote better life, I was willing to just lay everything on the line. I was willing to just give everything up, sacrifice time and work hard and do all the things that were necessary to have that life. And, I come across so many people who are on that path and who are doing those things. And then, they wake up one day and they're wondering, when do I get to enjoy this? When do I get to experience life? And I happen to be that same person. I happen to be the person who was working really hard and doing all the things that I was supposed to do and building up all kinds of, accumulating assets and building up net worth. But I was always wondering, when is this going to get good? When am I going to start feeling like I'm successful? When am I going to start feeling like I'm prosperous? And it was in the midst of all of that I started recognizing that the path that I was following might not have been the right one. And I sort of developed this path for myself and have shared it with thousands of people since.
And it is a path that I've seen people, when they follow it in order, right? That's the key. And you're going to talk about that more. When they follow it in order, I mean, I guess it's as close as you can get to a guarantee of, hey, this is the path that if you do all these steps, and if you listen to what these entail and take direction, there's a really, really high probability, more than trying it on your own, more than listening to somebody else's plan for your life. This is most likely going to give you the results you're looking for. And I want to just touch there for a second on something you said, that these 4 stages to financial prosperity, it's not just about making the most money, because as you kind of alluded to, like what good is that if you have no time, if you don't have the bandwidth to enjoy that, or even the headspace, maybe because you're so consumed mentally with making money that you can't even appreciate any free moments you do have.
Well, that's exactly what it came down to. I mean, the very first thing that I had to do in the midst of this was to sort of define what prosperity really was. And, you know, we live in a world that basically prosperity says is having more money or an abundance of money. And, you know, I'll just tell you that in my world and, you know, my quiet time while I contemplated all of these different things, you know, I would sit there and, you know, contemplate, you know, is that really what prosperity is? And, you know, just one day I was struck with the question, being a person who believes in Christ and God, that, I mean, I was just saying, you know, what does God want me to have an abundance of? And I got to tell you, when I ask people that question, they'll come up with lists, and money is never on the list. And it's now, that doesn't mean that that's not important, but that's not what people think of. And I came to realize, you know, all the things that are really important to me, the things that I want to have an abundance of: freedom, life, just great relationships and things like that. I started realizing that I wasn't looking or pointing toward money in any shape, way, or form.
That's incredibly powerful. Make that realization. A lot of people get to the end of their life and realize they've been chasing the wrong ball. So let's dive in. Like I know our listeners and our viewers are excited to kind of learn about these. What can you give us an overview really quickly of what those 4 stages are, and then we'll dive into each one individually?
Sure. Stage 1 is basically setting up the foundation, and that foundation is developing a Lifeonaire vision. It's having a vision for your life. What is it that you want out of life? Stage 2 is where we actually go out there and start making money, but it's basically to meet our needs. We have to, you know, we live in a world that on a weekly, monthly basis, we have bills to pay, we have needs that need to be met. And so stage 2 is actually meeting those needs. And then stage 3 in the 4 stages to financial prosperity is earning excess. And that's going above and beyond our needs. And then finally, stage 4 is where we begin to invest our excess into income producing assets that start to take over our need to work. And I will just throw in there that oftentimes we talk about a stage 5, and that stage 5 is sort of giving back. And the only reason that I don't call it stage 5 is because I feel as though that should be something that envelopes this whole thing. We should be giving back the whole time. We shouldn't wait until someday to put ourselves in that position. At least that's my opinion. And that's one of the reasons why I haven't added in or changes to the 5 stages to financial prosperity.
Got it. Fantastic. All right. So stage 1, you said is setting the foundation. What does that look like?
Well, one of the things that we basically start with is helping people to develop a vision for their life. Most people spend more time planning a party or a weekend getaway than they do actually planning their life. In my world, most of the people who I talk to are, you know, working in businesses where they've got some leadership roles, or they are the owners of their business, they're business owners, and they spend a ton of time planning their business. People who work, you know, decent jobs will spend a lot of time planning out their finances and their retirement, but they never take the time to actually plan their life. They don't come up with a vision for what they want their lives to look like. But the majority of people I come across can be very, very clear on what they want their finances to look like, what they want their retirement accounts to look like, how much money they want to have in the bank. And what we have done is we have sort of bought into this lie that more money means more life. and that having or achieving a certain goal is actually what gets us the life that we want. And therefore, we don't even look at what we want our lives to look like. We figure we have to hit these financial goals first before we can even think about living life. So we will put that off until we hit our financial goals. And I came to realize that that was the problem with my initial plan, was I was pursuing the financial goals, and that was with no regard for the life that I wanted to live. And in fact, this is where it all started coming together, was I was sacrificing the life that I had and the life that I wanted in pursuit of more finances. And I asked myself the question then, well, why do I need to do that? At a minimum, I want this life, and if I can have both, great, but I'm not willing to sacrifice life and relationships and everything else to also have the money. If I can do both of them, awesome. And that was the path that I chose to go down, was to, create that vision for my life and to know exactly what I wanted my life to look like. And that was important. And that's what most people are missing.
Two things you said really struck me. One is that so many people, when you ask them, if you were to ask them what they want their life to look like, the first thing they usually default to is like, well, I want a 2-story home on an acre of land and an SUV and the 401k fully funded and all this other kind of stuff, which is ironic, right? Because that has become the association of what they think of when you ask them what they want their life to look like. But what they're really telling you is what their balance sheet looks like. That's not life. And the other thing that I really want to point out here that I know is true for me, like, when I was someone who thought it was all about the money. And I thought if I had the money, then I would have the life somehow by default. Like once you get a certain, amount of income or cash flow or money in the bank, like life suddenly transforms, which is not true. Like, and anybody listening right now, if you think it's true, I'll tell you, you can try this on your own, but you will discover the same thing as Steve and I have discovered, is that it's not, you got to start focusing on life immediately. But I want to ask you, Steve, like, why do you think so many people just focus on finances? Like, how has this become such the number one thing that people go for? Like, they don't think about life. They think, oh, money. Where does this come from? Like, is it security? They're just afraid to be without? Is it society? Like, where do you think this is originated?
Well, it is definitely the society that we live in. This culture is so focused on that. And, we live in the greatest country in the world, but here in the United States, there's the quote unquote American dream. And that American dream has morphed into, materialism and the accumulation of wealth and goods. It's to own these certain things and to have these certain experiences. And, the American dream has become distorted. And the reality is what you started to talk about, the house on an acre of land and the 401ks and the SUVs. If we were to go on out and start polling Americans and asking them what the American dream is, we're going to get some version of that. Anything from the white picket fence to the 2 weeks vacation every year to being able to put my kids through college. There's this distorted American dream that is just sort of ingrained into us. And the moment that people start to come out of or graduate school, come out of high school or college, they're in immediate pursuit of this. They're going after it. They're going after it with all they have. And we live in a culture now where young people are trying to achieve what took their parents 40 years to achieve. They want it in 4 years. They want to have, a house bigger than their parents. And, we see that all the time, where the young kids own homes that are bigger than their parents today. And their parents worked 30 or 40 years to get what they have. But kids are, because of the way that we do things in this world today, are able to have more in a whole lot less time. But that comes with a price, and it comes with a steep price that most of them just disregard.
Okay, so if we can overcome this cultural belief that we have to focus on money first, and let's say we actually buy into this idea that life has to come first. We're on step one. We're talking about creating the vision. Like, tell me more about that.
Well, as we take people through that process, we try to get them to really pull away from their day-to-day. We want to remove them from the atmosphere that they're in. When we go to work every day, we're surrounding ourselves with people who are constantly ingraining into us, to work harder, strive, get more. We're constantly being bombarded with marketing messages of, the nicer, newer car, or the safer car, or the safer neighborhood. If you really loved your family, you would move here. And yes, we know it costs more, but if you love them, you're willing to make that sacrifice. And your children should have cell phones, because if you love them, they should be able to contact you immediately if there's any problems. And so, these messages that are continuously being ingrained to us force us to create a lifestyle that is very complicated and oftentimes hard to make ends meet just trying to sustain the lifestyle. And so we live in a world that tells us what our lifestyle should look like. And by taking the time to come out with your own vision, or develop your own vision, and to really focus on what is it that is important to you, to be able to verbalize that and to put that into writing. And we attack this from all different angles. We want to know everything from, what do you want your spiritual life to look like? What do you want your family relationships to look like, or your friendships? What hobbies would you like to pursue? What brings you personal gratification? And, we bring all different elements into it to try to help people to develop a vision of who it is they want to be, and what do they want their life to look like. And one of the things that we avoid in the midst of all that is business and money. We don't talk about that, because my feelings are this: life needs to be first, and then we pursue a career or a business that allows us to live the life that we want to live. Most people pursue a career or a business, they put that first, they start working, and if there's anything left for life, if there's any time left to live and experience life, then they try to experience the best life they can in the time that's left. And that has really caused so many issues in the world that we live in today. It's created dysfunctional families and marriages that are falling apart, because people are giving so much to their careers, to their businesses, and they're neglecting the things that they say that they're doing that for in the first place. And so, if our career or business is supposed to give us a better life, it should not compromise the things that are most important to us in our lives. But we allow that to happen because we've never made life a priority. We live in a world that says, do this other stuff first, get wealthy first, set yourself up first, then you can live life. And, that's the someday attitude. Someday when I achieve all these things, then I'll do this. And, I came to realize very quickly, and I'm grateful for it, that early in life, I came to realize that that was not who I wanted to be. And I didn't have that kind of patience. I also knew, and because I had a father who passed away at a very young age, that someday sometimes never comes. Someday didn't come for my father. He was one of those people who gave his life to working so that one day he could live and experience a great life. And that one day or someday never came for him. So that was a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah. Wow. And so that's powerful. I want to highlight a couple of things you said, and I got the impression, and I know this to be true, is you mentioned that, your vision is, what kind of person do you want to be? What do you want your life to look like? So it's a multi-dimensional I don't even like calling it a document, because it's so much more than that. It's its own entity almost that comes from you. And so this really includes everything from the kind of person you want to be, the kind of character you want to exude, to the how you want to impact other people around you, what you want your day to look like. You mentioned your spiritual life. We've talked about how this, what does your health look like? And you have vision elements that you've created that are suggestions for capturing all these different areas of our life, because we know that our lives are the result of many different compartments, many different components, that if any one of them is significantly out of alignment or out of whack, it has a potential, if it's important to you and it has effects in other areas of your life, to really to create problems for you. Like, so, maybe your if your relationship with your spouse isn't what it could be, because you haven't spent the time to create a vision for that relationship. Now that's going to affect, guess what? That's going to affect your health. That's going to affect your business. That's going to affect your peace of mind, all those things. And so you're talking about creating something that has all of these components together. Is that right?
That is right.
Okay.
So one of the things that I want to just add to that you had said earlier, and you said that it's not just this document, it's a living. I always say that it's a living, breathing, and growing document. But it is the thing that guides you. It is something that continues to change as your life changes and as you grow, as you pursue your vision and you start moving in a certain direction, things begin to change for you. Life begins to change. As I, was building a family, there was one thing, that I wanted, and I want to be able to provide. I want to be able to be there for them. But as my kids are getting older, the way that I'm there for them changes. And today, I'm becoming much more of that mentor to my older sons, and I'm becoming somebody who's coming alongside them and pouring into them in a different way. And I have to invest my time into them differently. And so my vision changes as I go. So this is a growing document. This isn't a destination. Your vision isn't a destination. It's the journey. And the journey continues to move and grow with you.
And I guess that's what kind of makes it different from just a list of goals, right? It's not just a check the box, like, yeah, I'm done with this, and then it's over, right? It's something much more different.
Exactly. So, within your vision, helping to get you from where you are to where you want to be, there are goals along the way. But the reality of the situation is your vision of the direction that you're moving to is a completely different thing than just goals.
Got it. So for someone that wants to create, they're at step one, they're at stage one of this vision creation process. What is your advice to them? You mentioned kind of pulling people out of their daily environment, getting them away from the normal obligations of their in the minutia of life. I guess to help them start to create what they want. What does this process look like for most people? Like when you first sit down with somebody to create their vision, I can imagine you get a number of different responses. What is that like, and what are your recommendations for somebody just starting off on this process of stage one?
So the first thing I want to say is that it is not as easy as it sounds as we're talking about it here right now, to just sit down and write this out. It certainly can come easier for some people than for others, but it is really not an easy process because it's taking you down a path that most people have never contemplated before. And I want to just emphasize that this is one of the most important things that people can do, yet very few people ever do it. And so the ways that I would love for people to be able to just sit down at their home and take some quiet time and be able to do it. But the reality of the situation is most people do not succeed with getting that done. Instead, we have really focused on developing a whole process that we teach people over the course of 3 days, how to do this. But more importantly, over the course of 3 days, they're able to walk away from one of our events with a vision in hand. And when I said about removing them from their day-to-day environments, the problem with trying to do it on your own is you have all of these filters that you're trying to process things through that are all around you. And it's really difficult to sit here and be honest with yourself about what it is that you really want out of life when you've got something else staring at you, staring you in the face, whether it's your work, whether it's the people you're working with, your superiors, your family. You start to take in and filter all the stuff that you really would like to have in life through the environment that's around you. And you're not honest with yourself about going after what it is that you really want. And so we take people through this process, whether it's a home study course or through an event, of being able to first establish what their values are, so that they can clearly begin to move down this path of putting the right things into their life that actually meet up or match up with the values that they desire to live by. We help people to get in touch with who they really are, because many people don't even know that. And this is one of the hardest parts of the process, is they don't even know who they really are. They have just been almost shaped, molded, and beat down by the culture that's around them into just almost living I hate to put it this way, but perhaps a robotic life where they're just going through the motions of what the world around them expects them to do. And they have never even had that opportunity to sit down, and the freedom to be able to sit down and say, who do I want to be? What do I really want to do? And we help people to get through all that. Oftentimes we do have some people who would be very successful in the eyes of the world who would come on out and sit down with us. But their problem is they're on this big ship that they have built, and it's moving, and they, in the eyes of the world, everybody's telling them that they're doing a great job, but deep down inside, they feel this emptiness. They feel like something is missing, and their world isn't lining up. Their personal life isn't lining up with what their business life appears to be. And they don't know who to talk to. They feel alone in this, and they really don't know where to go. They know how to fix business problems, but they can't fix their life problems. They don't know how to do that. And so having somebody come alongside of you and taking you through a process of step by step, helping you to get in touch with who you are, who you want to be, what the life you want, that is what we do when we bring people together in a room or through our home study course and walk them through a process that I have developed to let them get in touch with who they want to be, and to actually walk away from that with a clear life vision that they can begin to pursue.
You said something that really struck me just a couple of moments ago, is that this is a lot harder. I mean, and listen, if you've never heard of this Life Intervision thing, you're like, oh yeah, I know what I want. I'll tell you, it won't take more than a few minutes for Steve or I to sit down with you to help you realize for yourself, not in a weird way, but like in a revealing way, that you really probably don't know. And it is a process. And I remember the first time I went through this exercise, you brought me through this, Steve. I was looking at a blank piece of paper, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty revealing and pretty sad at the same time. But I know, my story, I went down the path that I thought I was supposed to go on, right? Like, and I've had friends do the same thing where we have things expected of us. Like, people look at us a certain way. I remember, right after I graduated from grad school, I was doing diets for people and training people online. Very simple life. And I remember people around me, like even friends and family, saying, Jason, you have a PhD from Duke and you're doing diets for people? Like, what a waste. Like, is this really what you want for your life? I did an interview with Ken Holmes recently, and he said how he was doing river guides, right? Whitewater river guides. And it was a simple life. And he got the same thing because he didn't want to waste his parents' money that they spent for college. And so I think part of this vision creation, one of the obstacles you will have to overcome when you create this for yourself, is you have to really uncover what it is you want, not what your family wants for you, not what's going to get you accolades, not what's going to give you a pat on the back. I was working for the Navy, and my mom was bragging to all of her friends, like, oh, Jason's doing, biological and chemical warfare research for the Navy. He's such a success. And, she was bragging on me. And at the same time, I knew that wasn't what I wanted, but yet, and so that's one huge thing that you have to overcome, is teasing apart what it is you want versus what society, your culture, your friends, your family, your coworkers, what they want for you. That's one huge step that I think prevents people. There's such a block there, because, and I think it's natural. Like, we want the approval and the love, the acceptance from people. And when you start doing something different than the norm, different from everybody else, there is a sense of fear sometimes that can be stimulated, that you're afraid of the effects it may have on those relationships and stepping away from the norm. But it is an incredibly powerful exercise, and things you will achieve when you have your own vision. And Steve, you'll talk about this later. People will start looking at you differently, and they'll start envying you, and they will start asking you how you did it, even though they may have given you resistance early on. So that's a huge thing I had to go through.
You just made a great point there, Jason, and a couple of the things that you had said, I want to just sort of paint this picture that if we look at life as a game, and I oftentimes would use the example of the board game life, but if you look at life as a game, one of the things that we can say about you was that you were playing the game well. You were doing everything that you were supposed to do in order to be a winner at that game. And I think that is the case for most of us. most of us are playing this game of life very well. We're playing by the rules. We're doing the things that we're supposed to do. Even the guys who call themselves rule breakers are actually playing by their set of rules, thinking that what they're doing is the thing that's going to make them successful. And most people just find that every single time they think they're getting close to winning, that sort of the rules got changed on them, that they're not close to achieving what they thought they were going to get. And you know, and then there's those who also all of a sudden they get that big victory and they feel like they're on top of the world, and a week or two later everything just feels empty because it wasn't what they thought it was going to be, and life wasn't going to be all that it was cracked up to be. And so we play that game well. We work hard at it. We train for it. We educate ourselves for it. We invest into it. We do all of the different things that we need to do to be the best that we can be at this game called life. And then one day we might wake up and realize we were playing the wrong game. And this is where I would suggest that most of us are just living somebody else's vision for our life. Somebody else wrote that vision. Somebody else designed it, whether it's the culture around us, whether it's our parents, whether it's a secret competition we have going on in our head with our siblings or our high school buddies or our neighbor, someone, you know, that we are just, you know, trying to beat at this game called life. And the sad part about that is that there's a constantly moving bar. And so when I talk to people about writing a vision for their life, what I'm asking them to do is to change the rules of the game. I'm asking them to set themselves up to win and to create rules of the game of life that is a game that they want to be playing, where the winner of the game is something that they define who the winner is, and they get to pick what it is that they want, you know, their life to look like. And when you get to be the one who makes the rules and come up with the object of the game of life that you're living by, well, then it becomes a game that's a whole lot easier to win. But if you're playing by the world's rules, they will change the rules on you every time you get there. And just real quick, think of people who have had tremendous success within the sports world. And, you know, they might go out there and they might win the championship and they're on top of the world. And then within a couple of weeks, they're forgotten. Or if they have a bad game, everybody's just tearing them down. It is when the world is the one who is making the rules, you can't win. They will constantly change it for you. They will always move the goalpost or the finish line, and you don't get there. And you're constantly striving. And it really, what our vision process does is it helps people to set up what the rules of the game are, and determine who the winner is. And it's when you're the one who gets to design the game, it's your game for life. You're no longer playing the wrong game.
That's huge. You know, as you're speaking, I was thinking of like the person who is told they're in high school, you know, first of all, maybe they're in high school and they're told they have to get great grades to go to college because, you know, the only way you're going to succeed is with a great education. So they spend all this time, all this money, they get into a great school, they do all the extracurricular activities. They go to school, they take the loans out, and they get that. Now they're in the next pool for job applicants. They get the job, and now they're working their way up into that job, which chances are they just they had to take because of the situation they were in. And now their life becomes the pursuit of, okay, I want that next promotion. I want the next title. I'm going for the corner office. I want ownership. I want, you know, whatever. And it just never ends. But in the entire time, that's not even their vision. That's not even their rules. They're playing by somebody else's rules. So what is your suggestion for somebody like to create their own rules is what I'm guessing. And what does that look like for people? How do people create their own rules?
I mean, that's really the vision process that we take people through. We first have them define what prosperity is to them. And through that process of defining what prosperity is and taking them through this process of writing their vision becomes the object of the game. And their vision is unique to them. It's not influenced by other people. It's not written by somebody else. And that's one of the things that we focus on. It's not my goal. I don't want to tell people what their vision should look like. They've already had the world around them telling them what their lives should look like. Instead, my goal through this process that we take people through is to extract from them what it is they want and what do they want their vision in life to look like. And then we help them to get there.
Do you see any similarities with people? Like, I know that everyone is unique and everybody has their own spin on this, but are there things you see pop up over and over again in that definition of prosperity?
You know, as we sit here and if we look at it from the vision perspective and we take people through that process, what becomes important to them, you know, the definition that they come up with is freedom. They want to have freedom. And now if you ask freedom for what? Well, they want the freedom to be able to do what they want to do with their time. They want to be able to invest into relationships. And we find that there's two things that really come up. And I'm careful to say this. I don't like to tell people this up front because ultimately I want them to come to that conclusion for themselves. But with very, very few exceptions, almost everybody, common themes within people's visions are that they want freedom and they want to experience great relationships and they long for that. And but when they can come to that conclusion for themselves, they now realize that they need to start doing the things that make that happen. Now, to just put things into perspective, when we ask people what do they want out of life, most people will sit there and tell us that they want great relationships, and that's why they're doing the things that they're doing. But really, what they're doing is, in most cases, they're sacrificing their relationships to get money in hopes that they get money and that money now allows them to have the relationships back. And that's the crazy part. They already have what they want. They sacrifice it and give it away in return for something that they hope will one day give it back to them. And that's the vicious cycle that this thing ends up in, that even people who have been successful making money have now already compromised the relationships that they have. So instead they go and work more because of the pain. And it's just this vicious cycle that keeps on going. And they think that they need to make more money to have those relationships back because the success I already have had isn't working.
You know, you remind me of something I've heard you said before is like, you know, a lot of people will say like, I want to be a better parent and I want to provide for my kids what they didn't have. And, you know, I want this and that. They'll use their family as a scapegoat oftentimes for their habit and almost maybe even addiction of working long hours. And what the wife, the husband, what the kids really want is that relationship. They don't want the money. They want their spouse. They want their dad. They want their mom. And so that's kind of a false dichotomy there that people can even lie to themselves. Maybe if they took the time to be honest with themselves, they'd realize what they're doing. But many times, like it's how much more noble is it to say that you're doing it for your family than to just to admit that you just like you are after money, right? And so one of the things I'm wondering though is, you know, I've heard you ask this question before. You know, one of the ways we model, I think, in society as a whole, and the way we learn is by watching other people. And so I've heard you say before, for people to imagine who is living the life that you have imagined, a life of prosperity that includes all the different aspects of things that you find important and valuable, and think of who that is. Tell the listeners what that looks like for you and what you usually normally say.
You know, the first thing I want them to do is really contemplate what does living a life of prosperity mean to them, and to develop that picture in their mind. What does that life look like? And, you know, for most people, that's going to be something along the lines of that they have the freedom to do what they want to do. They have great relationships. They have freedom with their time. They're not a master to, you know, not being mastered by money. But the reality of the situation is, once they sit there and they come up with that picture of what a day-to-day life, what a day in that life would look like for them, I then ask them to now tell me and think of all the people who you know personally that actually have that life. And if I'm standing in a room of 100 people, I will tell you, I've done this many times. There's many times when I'm in that room of 100 people when they can't think of a single person. Most of the people in that room, there have been times with 100 people, not one person could think of anyone who was living and experiencing that life. Certainly, there's no more than a handful of people who can think of 2 or 3 people who live and experience the kind of life that they were just imagining in their head. And so the thing that I have to challenge them with is this: there is no shortage of success information out there. There are all kinds of things on the internet. There's all kinds of books and magazines and teachings and workshops and seminars and everything under the sun that will teach us how to live and experience a successful life. But if all of that stuff worked, we should be able to come up with long lists of people who are living and experiencing that life of prosperity that we were just imagining. And so this is where I challenge people. Can we at least begin to acknowledge that maybe there's something wrong with all of that information? Because if it did work, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to think of a ton of people, because there's more success information out there than we could possibly process in a lifetime. And we can't even begin to scratch the surface of all the stuff that's out there. And so as I take people through this process, the reality of the situation is a lot of that success information is pretty good and it will work, but it's missing something. And what it's missing is this critical first stage of the 4 stages to financial prosperity. Never do they have you contemplate your vision for your life. Why are you doing this in the first place? And what is the purpose of this success? What does this success need to do for you? Instead, most of those programs out there would have you give up your life and sacrifice your life and glorify that, that you were somebody who was willing to lay it all down on the line. You worked tons of hours. You skipped dinners. You weren't home with your family. But, today we can pat you on the back because, you've made millions of dollars. Meanwhile, your family doesn't even know who you are because you weren't there for them. And I think, that same person is someone who says, I was doing it for my family. I was doing it for them. And the only thing they did was alienate them and distance themselves from them. And so the problem with most of the success information that's out there is it's missing a critical component. And it's typically just taking people right to, hey, here's how you make a lot of money, but doesn't lay the foundation for how to do that the right way.
Got it. That makes a tremendous amount of success. And I'll tell you, it made a tremendous amount of sense is when people associate success with this. That's why we have these dysfunctional families. This is why we have 2/3 of Americans overweight or obese. This is why we have a 50% divorce rate. These are all the effects of not having a vision, not creating the game of life your way. The other thing, when you're talking about the number of hands that go up in a room when you speak, same thing happens to me. And when I see this, what also strikes me in that moment is that I'm standing in a room of people that are taking, like usually it's a real estate meeting or it's a business meeting or people that are there to improve their lives or quote unquote, improve their businesses. And yet even in this population of people, which already has separated itself from the general population, because the general population is at home watching, Honey Boo Boo or I don't know whatever the latest Netflix series is, right? So here's a group of people that are actively trying to do the right thing. They have the best intentions, are good people, and yet they're still struggling. In a room of those people, when you see that low number of hands go up, if any, it is such a powerful statement that you're right. Yeah, something huge is wrong here. Something's missing. The other thing you said that really struck something with me is that I think we've tended to glorify in our culture busy. Like we brag about how busy we are. It becomes a badge of honor. It becomes part of our identity. We feel important. We feel valued. We feel like we're hustling. And what we're really doing is going further down the wrong road. And we have to come back to the sense of really what's most important.
Mm-hmm.
So
I just want to say, when you talked about those rooms that we're in, those are the people who are playing the game very well. They're playing it. They're doing everything they can to equip themselves to be a better player at the game. The problem is they're playing the wrong game.
Right. And so you've experienced this yourself. And I don't want to kind of give away any of your story yet until we jump into this. Is there anything you want to say more about stage 1, or could we wrap this up before moving to stage 2?
I think we can move into stage 2.
Wow, man, we're back. I'll tell you, what did you think of that? I mean, I thought that was incredibly powerful. Steve talked about a lot of stuff and how, so by default, almost if we don't have our own vision, we're going to live somebody else's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and That is so true because listen, everybody, if you really think about it, we all have rules. We create rules, right? We call it how we live our lives, right? And if you don't have this vision, you don't create those rules, somebody else is going to create them for you. And guess what? They're not going to create it for your better way. They're going to create it for their own, live their life better, right? So this is a powerful episode. I would tell you guys, go and start implementing this stuff. Start writing your vision right now. Take what Steve just talked about at this particular call and just start implementing this stuff. Speaking of which, before I forget, we're going to talk more about the episode, but one thing before I forget is go over to the Lifeonaire app. You can download it from, what is it? The iStore, as they call it, the iTunes store, iTunes store, Android, whatever they do. The Apple people know. Yeah, those Apple people. Or you can get the desktop version of this if you're not a phone person. Just go to lifeonaire.com. And the reason I'm saying this is because there are some free vision building resources over there to get you started. We have something called the Lifeonaire Fast Start Kit that you'll enjoy a lot. Peter, the other thing, with vision, it's kind of weird because, I run into people that sometimes there's a mixture of responses. Like I see some people that are really excited by this and it's brand new and their eyes are open for the first time that they can actually take the time to do this. Some people I actually see kind of shrink back. They're almost afraid of creating a vision for themselves. Like it almost means like either they've made a mistake in the past and they feel bad about that. Like they're finding out when they're 40 years old that they could have made these different decisions. And that makes them feel bad, or sometimes, and that challenges their identity sometimes, or sometimes I see people afraid of taking responsibility for their lives too. And when you realize that this really isn't within your control. Now, listen, I'm not saying that stuff doesn't happen to people. We know this, right? Like life can throw you some crazy curveballs, but some people are afraid of taking responsibility for their lives because they'd rather kind of just go along with the crowds. But I'll tell you this, I use this analogy with my students and I say to them, listen, consider the vision be like your roadmap to getting where you want to go. So let's say you live in Michigan and you want to get to LA. If you don't have your GPS on, if you literally don't pull out your phone and turn it on, right, to see how that's going to take you, is it going to take you a lot longer to get to LA or maybe even not get to LA? So consider your vision as like the GPS. That's how much you need this. So you wouldn't drive from here to LA without GPS. So why would you drive your life, run your life without a vision being the GPS, Right. So that makes a lot of sense, and I think, of course it does. I mean, you said it. You said it. Duh. Yeah. How dare I question you? And, it's just pretty powerful. And, along those lines, I see a lot of people who also say like, oh, I know what I want. I know what I want my life to look like. And then when I start questioning them, it doesn't take too long for them to realize and myself to realize they really don't know. And I get it. This is kind of hard. Creating your vision is hard. Like I was telling Steve in the interview, like I mentioned that first time I did this, like I sat there and looked at this piece of paper and I said, all I could list were like the things I wanted, like, materially. And I'm like, wow, like this, I haven't given this any thought. Yeah. And so it was really eye opening for me. And, and that's this, by the way, because it's so difficult. This is why, like you mentioned, it takes us a full 3 days to get through this with people at our events. Right. And the thing is, when you do start working on this vision, you get to learn a lot about yourself. Yeah. You learn a lot about you. Just that process will teach you so much about who you are, how you operate in life, what you do and what your priorities are and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to be a good learning tool even during going through the process. So I'm excited for you. Yep. Awesome. So get on over to the Lifeonaire app, download the app, go get on the desktop, get those free vision resources, start taking part in the community there. You can get questions answered. Also, we'd love to have a review from you if you've enjoyed this, and we hope to see you on the next episode. Take care, be well, be blessed.